Hey guys, and welcome back. So today we are discussing another solved case, and I also have a podcast so you can listen to these episodes on the go. I always forget to mention that at the beginning. It is called Koala Crimes. And before we do get into it, I do want to thank today's sponsor, and that is Casetify. So if you've never heard of Casetify, they are the most popular tech accessory company in the world, but in particular, they are most famous for their super protective phone cases. And if you're not currently using or have never used a protective phone case, now is the time to begin, because our entire lives are basically on our phones these days. So Casetify also have literally thousands of super cute designs on their website. You can also personalize them, which kind of makes them a really great gift as well. And the Impact and Ultra Impact series are my personal go-to. I feel like they're just your everyday, sleek, easy to hold in your hand type of phone case. They also have new EcoShock technology on the iPhone 14 series, which provides 20% more protection. And if you are clumsy like me, not to worry, their phone cases are designed to withstand drops of up to 3.5 meters, and they are 5 times grade military standard. Another thing I do love about Casetify actually is that they do support artists. Like, they don't just get their designs from any old place. They actually do hire artists to make the phone designs. And I did want to tell you who my personal favorite was. Her name is Marta Olga Clara, and 2 of my cases are actually from her. I have one right here. She has super cute, fun, girly designs. So if that is your thing, check her out. And another reason I really do love Casetify is that their phone cases are made with up to 65% recyclable, I can't say that word, recyclable, and plant-based materials. So if you do want to find a new way to make your phone look nice and jazzy and protected, of course, as well, I do have a 15% discount code. Just go to casetify.com/samanthamelanievid/. I'll have it on the screen and down below in the description, and that will automatically give you 15% off. And having said all of that, let's get into today's case. On August 26 of 2015, 20-year-old Jody Myers and her fiancé, 29-year-old Neil Archer, were attending a surprise birthday party for Jody's stepfather near the town of Mannum in South Australia. It had been a rather tense night for the couple, however, as Neil clearly didn't want to be at this party. And while Jody tried to sit around the fire and enjoy the evening's festivities, Neil very stubbornly sat in his car and refused to join the party. Despite the efforts of Jody and several others trying to persuade Neil to come inside, even bringing him some of the food, he flat out refused for whatever reason. At around 8:30 p.m, the couple left the party, and the arguing continued at home, and it ended up with Jody telling Neil that she was going to leave him. The following day, Jody's mother, Lucy, received a text from her daughter that read as follows: "Can't have Kyle tonight. I've left Neil yesterday. Changing my number. Let you know where I am later. A friend picked me up. I'm not in this area. Send all details later when sorted stuff out, but I'm safe with friends. Love you, XXX." So this text was very clunky and void of any full stops or commas, which is why I just read it like a robot. It also had several spelling errors, and this really set off alarm bells for Jody's mother, Lucy. According to Lucy, Jody's spelling and grammar was usually pretty good, and even when she did make a mistake, she would straight away correct herself, resend the text, which is something I do as well. If I see I've made a spelling error, I'll do the little asterisks and resend it and correct myself. But she didn't do that on this occasion. She actually spelt friends as FREIENDS, which is something that she would usually have noticed. And of course, you could argue that Jody was stressed or in a rush. She left her fiancé. By the way, some articles said boyfriend, some said fiancé. There was speak of an engagement ring, which I'll get to in a minute. So I'm just going to say fiancé. I believe that is correct. She just left her fiancé the night before, clearly left in a rush. So, and she mentioned in the text as well that she was changing her number. So why would she take the time really to be like, oh, I've made a spelling error. Oh, full stop, comma. She's probably, her head's all over the place. However, her sisters as well also did not believe that Jody sent this text. Her sister Tanya stated, it's from Jody's phone, but it doesn't sound like Jody. But disregarding all of that, above everything else, there is literally no way that Jody would have left her 2-year-old son that she had with Neil, 2-year-old Elijah. He was the light of Jody's life, the love of Jody's life. There's just, all of Jody's friends and family agree that she just would not leave without him. There's just no way. And this is what prompted them, her family, to report her missing to the police. Her friends and family, although they weren't sure exactly what had happened to her, they were quite fearful that something more sinister may have happened. And although they had their suspicions, they weren't exactly sure. But when they did report it to the police, luckily it was taken incredibly seriously from day one. We all know that with some missing persons investigations, the police can brush it off. And especially because Jody was 20 years old, she'd had a fight with her fiancé, she had a little boy. I'm sure, it was a stressful situation. They could have easily brushed it off as somebody that needed a break and had chosen to go missing. But they didn't. They took it very seriously. And the police and the investigation themselves were rather concerned from day one, really. And the concern from the investigation and from friends and family only escalated when they found out that Jody's bank card had been used. So somebody had actually used her bank card at an ATM in the main part of town to withdraw $250. So either Jody was out there and didn't want to be found, or somebody was seriously trying to make it look that way. An investigation into Jody's disappearance soon began, and from what I can tell, it was a pretty big story in South Australia. I actually personally had not heard of this case until a subscriber recommended that I cover it. So shout out to that person. I can't remember. It was a while ago now, but I know there are a lot of you that watch that are from Adelaide or South Australia. So if you are, comment down below, the murder capital, as they call it. But anyway, so of course everybody that was close to Jody was spoken to, her fiancé, her 3 sisters, her brother, other friends, family, but nobody could really provide them with any useful information on her disappearance, except of course for her fiancé Neil, because he was the last person to see her. So Neil told police that himself and Jody continued the arguing on the way home after the party, and apparently on that trip she threw her engagement ring out the window. During the investigation, police actually did try to find this engagement ring, but I don't believe it was ever recovered. And he says that the last he saw of Jody was her getting into a red Nissan X-Trail with a man and a woman that he did not recognize. The police released this information to the public, as well as the fact that Neil Archer was their one and only person of interest. Only really by default at this stage, as one, he's the partner, so of course he is going to be a person of interest, and again, he was the last person to see Jody, and 2, they didn't have any other suspects at this point. The investigation, of course, conducted several extensive searches in the local area, including local bushland where Jody was last seen, Neil and Jody's home as well as the Murray River, but not a trace of Jody or any of her belongings were ever found. Not even the engagement ring that she allegedly threw out the window on the night that they had their argument. And as the case began to gain traction locally, friends and family began to come out and speak to the media, making statements on various topics. And one of these people was Margaret Archer, which was Neil's mother. So Margaret, who was 55, was asked about how Jody's son was doing, Elijah, and she said, quote, "We tell him mummy's gone shopping. She'll be home soon," which we hope she is. "Her son needs her. He needs his mum." And Margaret added, "Just come home, Jody. Contact somebody. Let us know that you're okay," end quote. And of course, Neil himself also made several statements to the media. They actually, I guess, confronted him or went to speak with him outside of his home, where he was seen holding his son, playing with his son.
Holding the son he shares with his missing partner, Jody Myers, Neil Archer was today calm about the attention he's received from police.
Well, it's a bit stressful, but like I said, I'm more than happy to help them with their inquiries and everything else and give them everything I can.
So let's go back to talking about the fact that Jody's bank card was used the day after she went missing, because that is a pretty major point in this story. Of course, police requested to see the CCTV footage from town that was over the ATM machine. And when they went to review it, they were shocked by what they saw. Withdrawing money from the machine was not Jody, and it wasn't Neil either, as they had suspected it would be. But it was a woman wearing a hoodie with the hood over her head in an effort to conceal her identity, no doubt. And it didn't take too long for police to figure out who this mystery woman was. It was Neil's mother, Margaret. Her actions, although rather suspicious, didn't make her a murderer, but it did make her a thief. So police arrested her for theft and had a bit of a chat with her. I don't exactly know what Margaret's excuse was for being in possession of Jody's bank card and then proceeding to use it after she had gone missing. I mean, she honestly may have just been a bad person that needed money and Jody wasn't there and she had her card for some reason. Maybe, who knows? There's all sorts of reasons why somebody may have someone else's bank card when it comes to, family. But she did venomously deny having any involvement in Jody's disappearance, both to the police and publicly.
What have you been charged with, Margaret?
Nothing. Innocent.
No comment.
Have they accused you of using Jody's ATM card? Did you use the ATM card?
No, I didn't.
You seem very upset.
Yeah, well, I don't like being charged with something I haven't done.
Margaret was released on bail after this, but this strange occurrence did prompt them to look a little bit closer into Margaret's actions around the time that Jody went missing. And one of the things that they found that was interesting were some receipts in her bag. She had 2 receipts from 2 different hardware stores. She had purchased 10 bags of cement from one hardware store and 10 bags from another, plus a wheelbarrow, and this cement equated to 600 kilos, so quite a lot. But of course, the investigation wanted to confirm that it had been Margaret that had made these purchases and she didn't just wind up with the receipts. So the police went to check the CCTV footage from Bunnings, which is an Australian hardware store franchise maybe, and of course they're our premium sausage sizzle destination. But anyway, they checked the CCTV footage from Bunnings from 3 days after Jody went missing, and they saw that it was indeed Margaret buying all of this cement. But why was she buying so much cement? Of course, buying cement is not a crime, but it's, they still needed an explanation. I should also mention that Margaret actually used the money that she had withdrawn from Jody's bank account, the $250, to buy the cement. So kind of weird. So all of this is looking a little bit strange, but it wasn't until police spoke with Margaret's husband, Lawrence. Well, okay, let me just tell you what Lawrence said, and then you can come to your own conclusions, because it had me side-eyeing Margaret, that's for sure. So according to Lawrence, or Laurie as he was known, who was actually away at the time that Jody went missing, he was in Tasmania. Upon arriving home, his son Neil told him that he had an early Father's Day gift for him. And Laurie kind of balked when his son told him this because, well, Neil wasn't exactly known for his gift giving or his generosity. Anyway, Neil leads his dad outside to the shed, and inside he shows Laurie the fresh slab of concrete that he has just laid down on the ground. Laurie was somewhat surprised by this because, as I said, he considered his son generally lazy and selfish. Not to mention that Neil had, in Laurie's words, done a terrible job laying down the cement. Regardless, Laurie thanked his son for this interesting Father's Day gift, didn't think much of it, and went on about his day. Of course, when the police heard this story, they began to put a few pieces of the puzzle together. And Neil went from being, a general person of interest to their number one suspect. In the meantime, there was another person that was part of this story that was really grappling with their own conscience, the information that they possessed, and their family loyalties. Neil's brother Aaron was actually asked to perform some certain tasks, which I'll discuss in a moment, and this made him aware of some very disturbing information. Aaron actually tried to persuade his brother Neil to go to the police himself, but Neil refused and left Aaron with really no choice but to go to the police himself. And of course, he probably felt at the time like perhaps he was betraying his entire family. On September 24 at 1 a.m, Neil Archer agreed to meet up with police in an undisclosed location following his brother's visit to the police station. Not long after this, he was taken into custody, where he was arrested and formally charged with the murder of his fiancée, Jody Myers. One day later, the police began their search of Laurie and Margaret's house, which is located in the town of Mannum. And Mannum, by the way, is about an hour and a half, I think, outside of Adelaide. Just before lunchtime that day, forensic specialists located the body of a female buried in a shallow grave. And the shallow grave was located under the fresh slab of concrete inside the shed. The same slab of concrete that had apparently been a Father's Day gift for Neil's father, Laurie. This body was soon confirmed to be that of Jody Myers, and at this point it had been 1 month since her disappearance. And the investigation did soon make a statement proclaiming that this had very likely been a domestic violence murder. Following this horrific news, Jody's brother-in-law actually made a public statement to the media where he said, quote, "We were hopeful for her safe return until this devastating news. The passing of Jody will leave an unfillable hole in our hearts. We are blessed with good memories of our innocent, loving mother, daughter and sister who you could not fault in any way, which is all we have left. These memories we will hold dear forever." End quote. Several months later, Neil's mother, Margaret, the one that stole the $250 and bought all of the cement, was remanded back into custody to await trial for her involvement in Jody Myers' murder. And she still was very much maintaining her innocence. And it was presumed that Laurie, Neil's father, had no knowledge of this very disturbing cover-up. So let's quickly recap what really happened on the night of the murder and fill in some of the gaps in this story. When Jody and Neil arrived back home after the surprise party, they got into an argument over the fact that Jody's parents had apparently been trying to break them up. In a fit of rage, Neil absolutely lost control and began strangling Jody with the cord of his hoodie until she passed away. And Neil would actually later claim when he was in prison, he told several inmates that his mother had actually been there and was the one holding Jody down, but this has never been proven. And at some point between murdering Jody and the next day, Neil contacted his mum, who I guess agreed to help her son cover up this murder, the murder of the mother of his child, and for Margaret, the mother of her grandson. Just so disturbing. So as I said, Margaret was the one that purchased the cement. She was the one that withdrew the money from the ATM machine. And she actually also topped up Jody's phone with $10 credit to send the clunky text that I read out earlier to Lucy, Jody's mum, which is probably why it sounded a little bit all over the place and nothing like Jody. So basically, Neil got his mummy to do all of his dirty work. I also don't believe that Jody's phone was ever located or her engagement ring, but I could be wrong on that. It's also worth noting that Margaret had actually been a victim of domestic violence herself in the past. So it's odd and somewhat ironic that she would assist her son in covering up the ultimate act of domestic violence. When I read this fact in the story, I was shocked. As much as you may love your son, I don't think there's an excuse to help them, or love your child. There's never an excuse to help them cover up something so incredibly awful, although I can definitely see people defending that action to a certain point, not because I don't agree with it myself, but I'm sure there's parents out there that would say they would do anything for their child. Maybe Margaret would not have actually assisted in killing Jody, but it's bad. It's really bad. And also quite disturbingly was the fact that Jody's son, Elijah, was with Neil and Margaret through a lot of this process. So he actually went with Margaret on several errands. And this is again very, very shocking and disturbing to me. Elijah, who again was 2, was left in the car when Margaret went into these hardware stores, which is a crime in itself. But it does get worse. Unfortunately, it turns out that Elijah was actually at Margaret's house when his mother was transported there and buried. And apparently he had been inside asking where his mother was. So just shocking, disturbing information as you dive further into this case. It truly is. During this time period as well, police had actually intercepted calls between Margaret and Neil, where they discussed the cover-up. So, I mean, there really was no way around it. They were both very guilty. And I did also mention Neil's brother earlier, Aaron. So his mum, Margaret, tried to get him in on this cover-up. And not only Aaron, but his stepsister as well. Margaret tried to get them both to burn clothes and destroy evidence like the cement bags. But Aaron very smartly refused, and of course he eventually went to the police. And can we just acknowledge how incredibly stupid these two human beings are, Neil and Margaret? They literally made mistakes every single step of the way, and they likely truly thought they were going to get away with this murder, which is just an absolute joke. In 2016, Neil Archer pled guilty to the murder of Jody Myers, saving her friends and family the anguish of a trial. In 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum parole period of 22 years. And that's actually a pretty good result by Australian standards, and also the fact that he pled guilty. In South Australia, you can actually get a sentence reduction for pleading guilty of about 30%, but the judge thought that he, quite frankly, didn't deserve that. And also Jody's friends and family were happy with this outcome, it's worth noting. And as for his mother, Margaret Archer, well, she waited a hot minute to confess her guilt, quite literally waiting until the 11th hour to change her plea from not guilty to guilty. Her lawyer stated that Margaret Archer had led an otherwise blameless life. She's been very busy caring for a large family, which end quote, which is neither here nor there, quite frankly, considering she literally waited until the last possible second to change her plea. It kind of shows that she has very little remorse for her actions. Anyway, in 2018, she was sentenced to 6.5 years behind bars for assisting an offender. And in June of 2022, Margaret was actually released from prison, but she was handed basically straight over to Border Force, where she was ordered to be deported back to the UK, where she was originally from, and where she currently does live, as far as we know, as a free woman, which is far more than Jody will ever have. And as for Jody's son, Elijah, he is now in the care of Jody's mother, Lucy. So let me know your thoughts. I am, by the way, going to leave some domestic violence information in the description if you or somebody you know needs assistance. If you found value in my content, consider subscribing or rating. I don't seem to ask that enough. And until next time, stay vigilant and stay safe.